Yeah, that's
Anyway,
insanity. And now that we're contemplating the 12-game expansion,
we're not contemplating. It's coming
I mean, it's
2024.
happening. It's happening, but to see what this would kind of look like is getting really interesting because it still gives credence to conference champions, right?
Yep. You get a
So
first round bye.
you get a first round bye if you're a conference champion, and then what's the seating? How's the seating work past that?
Same. I think it's like one, two, three, four, five plays six or five plays 12,
Five
whatever.
plays 12, six plays 11,
Yeah.
seven versus 10, 8 and 9,
Yep.
right? And it's still interesting because I've seen quite a few mock-ups. Here, I got one up real quick that I'm going to share.
Yeah, go ahead.
Let's see if I can do this right real quick. Let's see. Chrome tab. There we are.
There you go.
So this is what it would look like with this current year's seating,
Can you make it a
which
little bit
is
bigger?
I can try. Let's see if I can do this without it looking crazy.
There we go. No, there you go.
Where right there?
Yeah, I think that works.
All right. So you got Georgia, Michigan, Clemson, Utah, right?
Yep.
Then you got Kansas State out here. Kansas State won their conference, but they're still not high up on the levers. And I think it's because they lost, because they had a loss already. So these guys get a bye. And then you come out to where's 5? TCU, Ohio State, Alabama, Tennessee, Kansas State, USC, Penn State, and Tulane gets in. So I think in a sense, Tulane getting in is pretty. That's probably one of the upsells of this model.
Yeah.
Georgia being in that really doesn't change much. They do their thing. Ohio State not getting a top 4 seeding really does change a lot of things for a lot of people. Utah, I think you can make a case that Utah really gets a shot inside of this dynamic as well.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, my struggle with this is though, is you've essentially with this model handed the SEC specifically, and I'll say this because I'm an SEC guy. You've handed them 3 slots every year from now on, a minimum of 3 slots in this model, right? Alabama's
Mhm.
going to make it, Georgia's going to make it every year because essentially, as long as you don't lose more than 2 games, you're good, right? And so I think what
Right.
I've always loved about college football is that games matter,
Right.
right? Like the regular season matters. So
Yeah,
like
definitely.
Georgia played Tennessee a couple weeks ago.
Hey, right.
Alabama played, and essentially, boom, Georgia won that game, um, which essentially meant that they had a clearer path to that number 1 spot. But now
I mean, I
it
think
cheapens
here
that game to me.
I think it what's unfair here, and you could probably check me on this because you probably know these records better than I do. Alabama lost twice this season.
Yep.
Tennessee lost twice this season.
Mm-hmm.
LSU lost how many times?
3.
3, including Georgia.
Yeah. Oh no, it was 2, and then they lost to Georgia.
Right. 2, then they lost to Georgia.
Mm-hmm.
It still feels a little unfair to me for LSU to drop out of the conversation completely with Alabama and Tennessee avoiding going through the SEC championship, right?
Yep.
Like in a case of
This
TCU and
right.
Kansas State's making it in. You know what I mean?
Yep. But I mean, you think about this: Michigan and Ohio State just played 2 weeks ago.
They did, yeah.
That game now under this model, like that game this year was the highest watched game of the
Yeah,
past 3 years, right?
right,
Across sports, one of the highest watched games across sports, period, in the United States.
right.
Under this model, that game is now meaningless because both teams make the playoffs regardless.
Right.
And so it's like I get it, right? Like this was a cash grab by the NCAA because they want the money, right? Because all of these games will be on TV and all of these games will have hella eyeballs. So that
Yeah.
means now you have 12 games, or what's that, 6 games that'll all get crazy ad revenue.
Right.
But man, like it just for me, the traditional, I mean, I'm not even a traditional college football guy. I'm just a
Right.
guy who likes college football. I just like the fact that as a Georgia fan, I'm on the edge of my seat for most games because one loss makes it harder for you to get in the playoffs. Now
Right.
I'm looking at it like, well, shit, as long as we don't lose 2 games, we in.
Yeah, I think it gives you some space, but also I do think it was getting a little crazy with seeking perfection for the Power Five, right? Because all the other teams, like what was it, the year that UCF had like a few years where they were just killing people, and it was
Mm-hmm.
like they just couldn't get into the conversation, right? And it's like this gives them a space now to kind of come in. Or Tulane. I mean, how do you look at Tulane or Utah and say, I mean, it did what it needed to do to a certain extent, right? But to see the same players on there, Michigan, Ohio State,
Yeah.
Clemson, Alabama, and Georgia specifically, it's like it's the same top dogs.
Mm-hmm. I will agree. Now, my struggle is going to be, right? So we have 12 teams now. There's going to be a year where you're going to have 4 SEC teams in this, a minimum of 4, right? Like,
Yeah.
because if LSU loses one less game, right? I think they lost to Texas A&M. They lost to Texas A&M the
Or
last game of the season.
or I mean, I think the other version of this, Jeff, that you didn't specifically bring up, but is interesting is take South Carolina out of this conversation.
Mm-hmm.
Because if South Carolina doesn't wreak South Carolina wreaked havoc all over
Mm-hmm.
this map for a lot of people, right?
Yep.
South Carolina beat, what was it, Tennessee
Tennessee and Clemson.
and Clemson, and that's why they got deranked, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, yeah, that loss can happen, and these teams still are making it. But it's also like telling you, if South Carolina's game doesn't happen, right, then I think you definitely are looking at more teams, more of that top tier group working in. North Carolina or Louisville has a stronger year in the ACC, right?
Yep.
I think you're looking at them kind of coming into the fold,
And so I
right?
think, we talk about the little guy in Tulane, but there's still a strong likelihood that the little guy doesn't get in. Like
Right.
if LSU doesn't lose to the worst team in the conference the week before they play Georgia, then
Right.
then then LSU is taking Tulane's spot because now they have 2 losses and not 3.
What? Or what about I don't even remember Penn State. I don't even know who
Penn
what
State
their
had a good Penn State had a good year. They only lost to Michigan and Ohio State.
but again, to your point, right? They
Yep.
lost to both those teams, and now they essentially have to go through them to get
Yep.
to the championship anyway. Right.
And if I know as a fan that those 2 games don't matter, I care
Right.
about them, yes, but they mean a little bit less now because I know I can lose one or both of them and still make it to the playoffs. So Penn State's like,
Well,
we lost.
I think the teams that really care about this model more so, I can't speak about Michigan. I don't know Michigan well enough to even have that much to say about that, right? But I really think your big 3 even on this map are Georgia, Clemson, and Alabama. They're
Mhm.
like, yeah, as long as I'm in though, I'm gonna
Yep.
make it to the Final Four. Right?
Yep. I mean, that's the
They're like,
reality. Like Georgia, Clemson,
mean-
and Alabama are like, I just need to get in.
we kind of do this, you know?
Yep.
And it's like, you can throw in whoever. Y'all think Ohio State is so good and they lose every time. So I don't know who told them that they're gonna be it, but
Or think about this,
you are
right?
not the
Like
one.
Tulane got a spot this year, or would get a spot in this model. Think about Notre Dame. If Notre Dame gets the benefit of the doubt every time, all they have to do is lose 2 games, 1 or 2 games, and they're going to get in, which means Tulane's not getting that 12 spot.
And
I can kick off. Who's that number 10 seed right there?
10 seed is USC.
Gone. If
I mean Alabama versus USC, Alabama's winning.
Well, no, right? I'm just saying if Notre Dame loses 2 games instead of 3, USC's gone. Tulane's gone, right?
Well, I mean, look at it this way. If you look at the bottom of your map, 4, 5, and 12, right?
Mm-hmm.
Utah, TCU, and Tulane, that is your Cinderella wing right? And it's like Utah really wasn't supposed to beat USC. TCU was like, they are the killer this year. They're the under the level killer, right?
Mm-hmm.
And they got to go to Tulane and Utah. It would just be a different, because I do feel like Tennessee, a healthy Tennessee, bombs Kansas State out of the water.
Okay.
Right. But with Tennessee being hobbled, I got you. Definitely neither one of those teams are making it past Georgia. You know what I mean?
The crazy thing about this model is a hobbled Tennessee team beats Kansas State. They beat Tulane. They still probably beat TCU. So they probably beat Utah.
I don't know. I think they'll beat Utah, and I think that's the problem with this, right? Is that because you're still giving a lot of credence to conference championships, right? Utah gets the shake over USC, which has held the crown for the Pac for most of the season, right? And it's like, one bad game, man. One bad game threw it off, man. And maybe that's what makes it.
Like Oregon lost to Oregon State. They were leading Oregon State 31
and Georgia.
No, they didn't. They weren't nowhere close to Georgia.
No, but I'm saying they lost to Georgia.
Oh yeah. No, So traditionally, games at the beginning of a football season don't matter. People, they're like, you were figuring it out. But they lost their last game of the season. They were winning 31-7.
See, I think it'd be different. I think the conference championship should still matter. Yes.
Mm-hmm. Me too.
But for the seeding of this, I think it's got to come down to who's the record holder for your conference, right? Because TCU beat Kansas State. And then it was like, they won the championship, yes, but any regular game like that, I'm sorry, I'm still taking TCU this year, right? TCU is a problem. They are a problem for most people. I think if you look over at the Clemson wing, Clemson beating Ohio State and they beating Penn State since they benched DJ. With benching DJ and that young boy came in, that young boy flying them things, right? They swinging them. Also, I think Alabama looks at Michigan like, oh, we gonna demolish this, right? Right. So with some training time. Oh, Saban on a bye. We got a little bit of time here because we didn't have to play in the SEC championship. Oh, we gonna air it out.